All right, morning, folks. I am Emma, as Joe kindly said. I did realize once I put this together, it looks a little like it's sponsored by the Moray Tourist Board. Just to give you a little context, Moray is very small. Glasgow City Council has about 630,000 people under its aegis, Edinburgh 520. Moray, we have 96,000. So we're little. We're lovely, but if you bump into us on the way to somewhere else, then you are lost. So that has some benefits when it comes to rolling out a system. So I'm going to talk you through some of the sort of the tips that we picked up along the way for our implementation if you're not as far ahead in the model as we are, and some of the troubles to look out for. The first thing we had to do was triage our resources, even with the DES funding. There's only so much you could do. And so we decided to buy some cakes and invite the survivors from Moray Women's Aid Peer Support Group to come and sit down and tell us who exactly they would had problems with when they were trying to work through the system, if they had children and were also victims of domestic abuse. And every single woman said social work. So that's who we targeted our training to at first. The gray section there is social work. And actually we started this, our first core training was in November 22. By our last one, or the next planned one in May, we've hopefully going to have trained about 95% of social workers in Moray. Again, one of the benefits of being a very, very small neck of the woods. Trainer troubles, not with the trainers themselves, absolutely wonderful, but at the time we rolled this out, there were only 2 accredited trainers in our area. And every single trainer I've ever met in this field also has a full-time job on top of their training responsibilities. And they were, because everyone was rolling out at the same time, they were booked up till kingdom come. We couldn't afford to get a trainer from the Institute because 4 days of external training from the Institute for the 4 sessions now costs £16,000. It's a little less then, but it's still significant. So we, with the blessing of our DES Fund Program Manager, who is here, thank you, we accelerated the plan for training our own trainers, getting our own trainers accredited. Instead of getting to the first year and to the second year, we got all 4 done in the first year, so we could then sort of carpet bomb the area with training, which worked quite well. Trainer trouble part 2 was something specifically from the trainers who fed back to me that they'd agreed to, when we made the agreement with their employers to release them for the trainer accreditation and a minimum of 2 cores per year. They didn't think that there would be more to it than that, but actually before they deliver the 4-day in-person core, they need to do a lot of prep, which comes out of someone's time budget. We assumed that with months-long trainer accreditation from Safe and Together Institute, plus the fact we pre-selected child protection or violence against women experts to start with, that they'd probably be able to hit the ground running, but that turned out not to be the case for any of them. Staff workload, we've already heard from the lassie in Perth. Thank you, Julie, I'm terrible with names. Everyone is post-COVID, post-austerity, everyone is stretched. Everyone's individually, emotionally exhausted. The social work department in Moray, to give you an example, is down to about 50% capacity. So releasing staff for that is very, very difficult. 4-day core training, a huge chunk of time to take out to sort of reschedule rotas around. We did sort of respond to this as well as we could by doing 2 days 1 week and 2 days the next week. But I have heard from quite a few people in our feedback that a lot of the core training is quite repetitive, and it's possible it could be maybe winnowed down to about 3 days, which would be awesome. As I said, we've been rolling this out for about 18 months now, and we started doing some feedback about, I don't know, 6 months ago with Joe's logistical help, bless her. So that was every single person who we contacted, all of our core attendees, they'd had a minimum of 3 months to sort of embed the system and find out, take it for sort of a road test, essentially. Great feedback. Confidence working with families affected by domestic abuse. This was the average we had from pre-core was 16%, and then post-core was 74%, which is spectacular. I don't know what that compares to with the national average, because in the learning report, as we discovered yesterday, there's a point system for this rather than a percentage, but we were happy with that. A large proportion of respondents noted that they had already focused on the protective actions of the survivor, but they all stated that they were much more proactive in identifying this to the women themselves, which was hugely appreciated. almost every single response used the word empower on the benefits of using the model. So the acknowledgement that the survivors take steps to protect their children was clearly appreciated by the women themselves. And I think there was a consequence of this of a sort of more close working relationship with their support workers. I think there's a couple of things long term that might be worth watching whether they actually impact, which is one, whether that leads to longer term and more improved engagement in this issue. And the second one is improved self-efficacy for the survivors themselves. We know it takes an average of 7 attempts to leave an abuser. But if someone has actually built your confidence up and said, you do have the survival skills, you have coped with this, maybe that will increase. I mean, then that's literally life-saving. So, and the final mention of the word empowerment was, it was acknowledged that failure to protect language persists in Moray, but actually, no honourable mention here, the entire criminal justice system, from police to the Crown Office to the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service to the Judicial Institute for Scotland. But every single person who had gone through court training in Moray and encountered this said they personally felt empowered to challenge it when they met it, which was absolutely spectacular. So, some sort of less glowing feedback we had. Some of it was easy to sort of troubleshoot, essentially. People did note that they would like ongoing support and troubleshooting with applying the model, which was easy. We have quarterly practitioners forums now, so they are attended by one of our trainers. We have 7 accredited trainers at this point, and me. So the trainers do a sort of brief half-hour input into one of the sort of a refresh of one element of the model, and then we just open it up for peer support and general venting. For anything which we can't sort at a local level, I attend because I then feed back to Anna and the national forum. So that works fairly well. Could do better. Translation. I've heard someone say that it needs a kilt put on it. We don't use the term domestic violence in Scotland for good reason. It's massively misleading given the range of actions which constitute domestic abuse. But also our child protection legislation, our adult protection guidance, our human rights legislation, GDPR, none of this is taken into account in this giant practitioner's manual that all of our core participants get. So they have to simultaneously translate, which is a problem. One thing that people noticed was a problem was a loss of momentum. They come back from core all fired up, but because, as Julie again noted, turnover is quite high right now, they were losing some of that knowledge, and the people who are getting into the system don't necessarily have it. We haven't been as lucky as Perth, perhaps. And it's inflexible and it's inexpensive. It's expensive to get new hires up to speed. This is a huge component of child protection in Scotland, but there's still no mention of it as I'm aware in the curriculum in colleges for related areas. Yeah. And while we've managed to, because we got the early bird special for paying for a core training session, we've got 40 online pick and mix modules. So when we have new hires, we can put them through that and sort of at their own pace, but that's not going to be free forever. It's sort of limited option. We can't afford to do new cores or even new overviews every time there's sort of new intake, if that makes sense. Other things that we noticed were an issue. Policies and paperwork might not necessarily, if they've been around for a while, align with the principles. So we've started doing reviews if people need that for their agency. Choose to Change is the 17 weeks perpetrator program that we have for criminal justice social work, and they were the first person to take us up on that. And there were a couple of points where things just were actually actively contradictory to the model. My email's up in the last one because I would really like it if you guys could email me if you've ever encountered any problems with information sharing when using the model. GDPR confuses everyone, including lawyers. I've written one of the lines down here, but it doesn't, the first line of the thing doesn't make sense. I went to law school and it doesn't make sense. So a lot of people we're finding are self-censoring. And the problem with that is that it's just such communication is so important when putting together a picture of coercive control. There's so many little elements. No one person's going to see the whole puzzle. You need all the pieces. You need to talk to each other. So if you have any issues with that, please give me an email. Tell me what they are. If you have any solutions, even better. All righty. So I'm going to skip the first part of this because it's largely been covered already. The lack of implementation plan was the problem, just because nobody considered the fact that a lot of our social workers particularly were really overstretched. They had to deal with the promise, the National Trauma Training Program, the graded care profile 2, and we've just come off care inspection as well to add insult to injury. But the biggest issue I'd like to flag up, and I'm not going to be the only person saying this, I hope, is that the relationship with the Safe and Together Institute is a problem. I'm pretty confident saying that we cannot have a proprietary system as a national policy. It's not going to work. Copyright materials are expensive. We're paying every time we use them. And more crucially, they're inflexible. Every single agency that touches on domestic abuse, and that's pretty much every single agency, can't either afford or need to send people for lethal review training. We need to be able to tailor them. But if we localize or target our resources according to the fine print of the Institute, then any material developed out of this process will be considered intellectual property of the Safe and Together Institute. An element of this I'd like to flag is fairness, the validity of really treating as copyright. I mean, these Safe and Together principles, they're incredibly important, and some of the tools that come with the model are fantastic. But the idea of, in order, not victim blaming, empowering women to see their self-worth, and holding men accountable for their actions, that's feminism 101. Those aren't Safe and Together principles. They're fundamental, and we have to be able to use them if we're going to embed this. There's no way we can pay every time we mention this, so to speak. So I know everyone's probably flagged this up. Public spending is under significant pressure. Just in the last 18 months in Moray, I did a tally. We spent £46,000 on this model, and that's doing things in the most cost-efficient way we could possibly manage, which is not sustainable. The Institute, the relationship with the Institute is also sort of endless. If you do, say, victim-focused training or Safe Lives training for Merrick, you qualify, and so long as you reference who copyrighted the materials, you can then go forth and train. You don't need to pay per head every time. You don't need to relicense the tools. You don't need to pay to reaccredit your trainers, though obviously ongoing CPD is important. A great contrast would be Safe Lives for Merrick. If you look on their website, nothing is behind a paywall. The dash rick, the tools, the guidance, all of it is easily available. There's no need to worry about that at all. And the reason I'm confident in saying this is because I know that it's all been said before. Before I came here, I did a bit of a Google about what else had been done on the Safe and Together in its early days, and it's not a huge amount. But what I did find was that because Edinburgh was the first place outside of the US that the model was used in 2015, what had happened was, my agency's straight here, Social Work Scotland had been approached by Scottish Women's Aid, Bernardo's, and the Improvement Service to develop plans for an institute to support the implementation of Safe and Together in Scotland. And the first thing that they did was undertake a small-scale scoping exercise. And there were two findings: the extent to which the Safe and Together system is a new and copyrightable approach, and the problematic relationship with the institute. And yet this came out in February 2019. 5 years later, I'm standing here saying the same thing. I know from the feedback we've had that I'm not the only person that's doing this. So my hope in saying potentially something unpopular today is that someone else doesn't have to stand here in 5 years and say this again. Because I've been in this field a long time. I work with the survivors of sexual violence in post-war Bosnia. And one of the most satisfying moments I've ever had was when a survivor at Women's Aid came up to me after their training and said, one of my social workers apologized to me yesterday because they'd been doing it wrong and they didn't know. And you don't get feedback like that in this line of work very often. So this is a spectacular idea, but the way we're doing it is not sustainable. That's all from me.